Hi, Christos Anesti, Christ is risen. Now, you're looking at me thinking, why does Father Angelo have a candle on the top of his head? What kind of goofy thing is he doing now? Well, this candle is actually part of the story, so that's why I wanted to start with it. Now, I don't want any of you out there to now be putting a live candle on the top of your head. I just wanted to do it because it's going to be part of our story, so I want you to remember this. Now, remember last week we talked about the ascension of Jesus. Jesus went up, and he told his disciples to wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit. And that's going to be our story today. So now it's been 10 days since Jesus went up, and all of the Jews from Jerusalem were coming into the city because they were going to celebrate this feast called Pentecost, which is the same feast that we're celebrating today. Now, not only did they come from Jerusalem, but they came from all over the different countries. And what happens in different countries? People have different cultures, just like we who are Greek, we have our own culture, and people who are Scottish have their culture, and then people who are Italian have their culture. So all these people were coming together in Jerusalem to celebrate this big Jewish holiday. Now, Pentecost is actually a Greek word because peninda, that means 50. And Pentecost is always celebrated in our church 50 days after we have Easter. So here's everybody in the city, and they're celebrating this Jewish holiday. Now, for the Jews, it's not called Pentecost, it's called Shavuot. After Jesus had ascended, and the disciples went back to their homes. And on the eve of Pentecost, on the night of Pentecost, all the disciples came from their different homes, and they all gathered together at one of the disciples' homes. So there they all are, together in this one room, waiting for this Holy Spirit. But they're thinking to themselves, what is this Holy Spirit? Is it like a ghost spirit, like woo? Or is it a person? Is it scary? Is it friendly? So what are they going to see? What is Jesus now having them wait for? So I think I'd be really kind of excited, but a little bit afraid because I've never seen anything like this before, and Jesus didn't tell me anything about what it was going to be. So as they're sitting there, all of a sudden, boom, the doors all open up, and this great gush of wind comes in and fills the whole room, and their hair is going all over the place, and it fills the whole house, not just the room, but it fills the whole house. As soon as that happened, it quieted down. And then the disciples were looking at one another, and what did they see? They looked on the top of each of the disciples, their friends' heads, and there was a flame just like the flame that I had on top of my head. And each one of them could see this flame. Now, I had a really tiny little fire flame, but you got to imagine that this was a really big flame. So, like, was their hair catching on fire? And were they getting burned? What was happening? Even though they knew that the fire was warm, it didn't even burn a little teeny piece of their hair. This flame now was filled with goodness and filled with love. And so it wasn't just a fire sitting on top of their heads, but inside one another, they felt not just who Jesus Christ, the presence of Jesus Christ, but they also felt then another person. And so all of their fears really weren't what they thought it was going to be. In fact, it was something that was very beautiful, but not like Jesus, where they could touch him and hug him and tell him that they love him. This was now invisible, just like God the Father. So the Holy Spirit is God, just like Jesus is God. So now what happens next? So remember that Jesus said, I will send you a counselor. Counselor, that's a big word. So it's just like in school, you have your teachers and principals. And in fact, most of you in your schools have a guidance counselor. It's the same word and it means the same thing. The Holy Spirit was somebody that was going to teach the disciples. That's what Jesus meant when he said, I'm going to send you the counselor, because he left before he could do all the teaching. And the teaching belongs to the Holy Spirit. I'll give you an example. Now, it's not like an exact example, but I think it'll help. So think about the movie Star Wars. Now, I know most of you have probably seen Star Wars. And remember Luke Skywalker? Luke Skywalker had a teacher, and that teacher was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And during the time that Obi-Wan Kenobi was alive, he was teaching Luke. But then he died. He was taken away before he could finish his teaching. So Luke had to go find another teacher. And the teacher that he was sent to was Yoda. And Yoda was the one that finished his training. Okay, so the Holy Spirit and Jesus aren't exactly like that, but maybe that'll kind of help to say that Jesus didn't get to finish his teachings, but the Holy Spirit came and it finished all the teachings that the disciples needed to have to do that very important job that Jesus gave to them, which was to tell everybody about the good news of Jesus Christ. So now, here they are with this fire over their head, and this fire isn't hurting them, but what's the purpose of the fire? What are they supposed to do with the fire? Do they have like superpowers? Well, remember what I said. There was a lot of people coming into the city of Jerusalem, and they came from all over, and they all spoke these different languages. And that's one of the reasons for the fire, and that's why it went on the top of every one of their heads, the disciples' heads, because each disciple was able to speak a different language. So this fire gave them then the superpower to be able to speak in a different language. And that's exactly what all the disciples did. They all started talking now in this language. Now, they were talking a real language, not like gobbledygook, blah, 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 blah. They were talking an actual language. They were talking Greek, and they were talking Egyptian, and they were talking Roman, and they were talking like a pirate.
I am us!
So they had all these different languages, and now that they had the teaching of the Holy Spirit as a counselor, and they had now from the flames the power to be able to speak anybody's language, that's how they went and they did their most important job, which was to tell everybody about Jesus. So now with this fire on their head, and they were walking around, were they like a fire hazard? I mean, could they not walk into a wooden house because they would burn it down? Or they couldn't bend over because they'd set somebody's hair on fire? No, it wasn't that. This was something that only the disciples then later on could see. In the beginning, everybody saw it. But after that, it was only something that the disciples were able to see. So it wasn't like they were walking around all the time with this fire on their head. Just like when you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, nobody can see that, but you know that God is there with you. And what does the Holy Spirit do for us today? The Holy Spirit, when we receive communion, comes into us and helps us know what's right to do and what's not right to do. So the Holy Spirit, you can think of it kind of like your conscience. And remember Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio's conscience? Well, the Holy Spirit is 1,000,000 times better than that. So just like Jiminy Cricket helped Pinocchio, so the Holy Spirit helps us even today, just like it did those disciples way back when. So it's important that when you come to church and you do the sign of the cross, that's when you're honoring the work that's being done by God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And you receive communion, and the Holy Spirit then comes into you and helps you make those really tough decisions and stops you from making those really bad decisions that you know are wrong.